genuinely breaks my heart to hear people who have lost so much time on something they never really wanted to be doing in the first place. So if you've done a graphic design degree and what you really want to do is music or photography or whatever it is, find a way to do that, because you won't ever succeed truly in something that you don't want to be doing.
That was Kerrie Allen, aka Gameface. Kerrie works with creators and creatives from all walks of life and helps them navigate the gap from a creative education to establishing themselves in the industry. She also works as a consultant for small to medium businesses and also has a product line under the label of Hey Control Freak, which sells products aimed to help business owners to control their chaotic life. Now, this episode is going to be slightly different because Kerrie is not a creator in the traditional sense, the likes of whom I usually have on this podcast. Instead, in this episode, we talk a little bit about Kerrie's journey, but also what it means to be a creative in the business landscape today and what you need to do to prepare for the creative industry. I want to do this episode because Kerrie's got experience with dealing with creatives, and she would have picked up on patterns and trends by speaking with a variety of these creatives, which I think will help an aspiring creator to understand themselves better and make the right moves. Now, if you're a regular listener for the audio version of the podcast, just know that I see you and I appreciate you so much. It's incredible that despite my inconsistent releases due to the lockdowns and whatnot, you have kept up, and I definitely really appreciate it. And I finally reached 1,000 subscribers on the channel, so thank you to those who've subscribed. It truly means a lot. I've made a video about that as well, so do check it out on my YouTube channel. And also sign up for my creative newsletter at www.tausivacas.com or send me a DM at tausivacas on Instagram to have your email included in the newsletter, or just simply to have a quick chat. Alright, without further ado, here is The State of the Creators Season 2 Episode 7 featuring Kerrie Allen. Hope you enjoy the show. This is The State of the Creators, a show about creative individuals who are on a quest to build something out of nothing. But that's the whole point why I do the podcast face to face, because I think it's a different dynamic. Tried, after COVID, I tried doing, I didn't do any, but I was guest in a few of them. The dynamics just doesn't feel the same when you're not face to face.
Yeah, I agree.
But the thing is, I don't have an intro or anything like that, and I've already started recording, so we just go straight into
Let's
it.
do it.
But before anything else, you not necessarily call yourself Gameface, but Gameface is your thing everywhere. What is Gameface?
Gameface to me is it's a way of life. It's just getting into the game, right? Because there's so much happening and there's so much opportunity to be created for yourself. Mm-hmm. And Gameface is a lifestyle. It's, like I said, getting involved, chasing what you're after, creating your own life. I've obviously shaped my life to be exactly how I want it, and I'm 41. I've had some runs on the board before I did that, but Gameface to me is just everything I do is about not just me, but other people chasing opportunities that are there for them and creating them for themselves if they need to.
Wow, that's very succinct, especially given that I didn't give you any leeway before the question. But with the whole idea of, I think, in my head, it's almost like being ready for having that game face on, right? Yeah. Do you play any sport?
Yeah, well, I did until I blew my knee out a couple of months ago.
Oh, yes, of course. How are you faring now?
Oh, look, it's repairing slowly. Yeah, I tore the full ACL and partial MCL, so it's pretty messed up. Netball, it's just not good for you. I haven't played in years because it's so bad for me, and it taught me a lesson. I played for about 5 months, and then
did you already have ACL issues prior?
No. Always been ankles, but the knee just. Obviously, the ankles are holding nothing up anymore, and the knee.
Well, at least you did it in your 40s. I did mine when I was 25, 24, and I haven't been the same since.
Yeah,
it sucks.
It's been interesting.
But for those who don't know who Kerrie Allen is, who is Kerrie Allen?
I am first and foremost a mother to 2 beautiful girls, 19 and 10, almost 11. The 11-year-old's going on probably 32 with the with the attitude she's got, but she's a world on wheels. Love them both. Mother to my 2 girls. We've got 3 dogs, so mother to them too, really. My husband has recently changed careers over to be a dog trainer.
Oh, wow.
And he is loving that.
Beautiful.
And we're learning a whole lot more about our little babies who get treated like kids. And I've always been a bit of, and I hate using words that are overused and a bit of a cliche around it, but I've always been a bit of a, I guess, disruptor in terms of I've never sat well in environments where things, you just do them as you're told. That's how we do it, and there's no questions asked. So I've had a long career through different corporate environments. So I've done many partial degrees and a few full degrees. But I started my law degree, accounting, I qualified in real estate, and then went back to do interior design, residential and commercial. So a bit of a serial learner, I guess you'd say. But the corporate environments, as much as I always did really well in them, they never fulfilled me, for want of a better word. I always felt like there was more that I should be doing. But what I did enjoy about those industries was helping the people. I had a lot of staff under me and managed a lot of people, and helping them to shape their role. And empowering them and pushing them to actually learn as much as they can. I was never a manager who held things back from the people who worked with me. If they wanted to learn, they can learn. So, but that was nearly 20 years. Wow. I did that for about 18 years. And after I had Chloe, my second child, nearly 11 years ago, went back to my husband and said, I need to do something creative. I cannot sit in purely corporate environments. There's only so much creativity you can shape into roles like financial management and all of those sort of things. So went back and did residential interiors. That was great, but not enough. So then I went back and did a commercial interiors degree, which was very branding focused as well. So, and that was when I went, that's it. No turning back.
Right. So essentially around your 30s is when you decided that, okay, this is it. So were you never a creative person growing up?
I was absolutely a creative person growing up. I was a straight A student in high school without much effort. So I took that for granted. I wish I still had that memory and that drive. But my guidance counsellor at high school, when I went to him and said I wanted to do interior design, he flat said, you will never make a career out of that. You are far too smart for that. Our advice is law or accounting. Right. So the guidance then, which was, I hope, is a little better than these days than it was then, but flat refused to be given any information or any guidance around the creative thing. It was, no, straight A students, this is what we go for. So I was always creative in my own life personally, and did a lot of, I'm always the person who creates invitations for parties and weddings, and when I had kids that gave me a perfect opportunity to be really creative. And I used to spend all hours of the night creating and cutting out things for the girls' birthday parties and doing what I could where I could. My own wedding, did pretty much all of that ourselves, didn't get anybody in to do that. So always found creative outlets, but never in the working.
What stuck out to me, the most interesting bit, is how you were advised against going to the creative route. And I think this is something, I'm originally from Bangladesh, and there, the whole mentality is quite conservative in this sense as well. Like if you're a good student, you do engineering and doctor and law, and people who suck at anything smart, they do the creative stuff, right? Like all the other things. I find it fascinating that that's the same kind of mentality there as well, to some extent. Was that the norm when you're growing up around colleges and universities?
I think so. It's, it was, when was I in high school? That would have been, mid-90s, mid-90s, and there was never a discussion around it. It was almost like that, struggling artist syndrome seemed to be the connotation around anything that wasn't academic, that wasn't professional. And, I went to a public school in a pretty low socioeconomic area, so it wasn't a status thing. It was just, it was still, the guidance was straight to, that's what you use. I don't know what the guidance was being given to the students who weren't achieving those grades, but it's, and I ended up leaving high school in year 11 for two reasons. One, because like I said before, I'm a bit of a disruptor, and I refused to sit and I did my first lot of TE exams didn't study. I refused to study, and I aced them. And I remember thinking, nah, I don't want to do this again. It's just I don't want to do it. And I actually had a really good friend, one of my best friends, pass away in year 11 when we were 16, and that was just the tipping point of, you know what, I guess I wasn't aware of thinking it at the time, but your eyes are opened that life is short, and sitting in an environment where it wasn't challenging and there was no support for anything other than what they thought was right for you, it wasn't a good mix at that age. So I look back and I'm really grateful that I did that for myself.
Right.
But I also think, I hope that now it's a lot more holistic when this guidance is being given to kids, and I think more so, I'd like to see over the next 10 years things change even more so, and I'm hoping that what we've faced as a society of late is enough to to finally push everybody to see that you got to do it your way.
Yeah. With that around those time, did you have supportive parents who were like, you know what, I think see your creative side, but or were they more in tune towards what's
interesting? It's interesting. You see, if you ask my parents, they would probably tell you they had no say in the matter because I was slightly, let's say, independent as a child. I remember having the discussion with my mum, and I was quite adamant. I'd made my mind up, and that's pretty difficult to shift in me. Once, I don't make decisions lightly, but once they're made, always have. And I remember just saying to her, I flat refused to go back, and she said, well, you can't do nothing. And there was one teacher at school who was in the sort of business faculty kind of thing, and he knew a guy who took, I guess they were like traineeships, but they weren't formalised, in a large wholesale organisation. And he said to me, if you're leaving, then at least let me put you somewhere I know, they'll look after you and they'll teach you. So he actually helped me get the job across there, which was great. And by the time, and that was 2 days after I'd told Mum that I didn't want to be at school anymore. And then I went back and went, right, you said I can't do nothing. I've got a job I can go straight out into. And it just happened at that point. Right. It's but yeah, I think if you ask them, they'd say they didn't get much of a say in the matter. And I think too, hindsight's a great thing, right? And now as a mother of 2 girls, I can't imagine wanting to push a child who's just lost a best friend at that point in their life too, and thinking and trying to force academics to be more important than happiness at that point. So it was timing and a little bit of independence on my part, I think.
With your experience of the things you learned in those corporate worlds and in some of the, going to the non-creative stuff, today you have, should I say, 3 different things that you do? So you've got Gameface, and you've got the Hey Control Freak, and you've got the Kerrie Allen establishment. Correct. Right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I've missed out on?
No, there's little branches off those, but no, that's the main.
Right. Yep. So one thing, the Gameface is your, business identity where you.
Correct.
That's who you are. Your thing.
Yep.
Hey Control Freak is a product-based
e-com business.
E-com business, and you've got the Kerrie Allen establishment, which connects creatives to the industry.
Yeah.
Right. So these are 3. Well-established business in their kind of own right. So, do you think you've picked up enough things from the corporate world that now acts as that helps you in these little pursuits that you're going ahead with?
Definitely. I started my business the week I finished university, and that went straight into the design stuff, and people were saying, what are you doing? You can't bounce straight from uni into business. And I said, well, actually I can, because I've been doing it for 20 years. So the business side of business comes naturally, which is really rare for people coming out of a creative degree, obviously, because there's not a lot of education within it, and what is within it, in my mind, isn't realistic to what you face as somebody going out on your own. But I had all of that and I was ready to go. What I needed was a piece of paper. And in fact, nobody's ever looked at that piece of paper, let's be honest. But what I needed was, I think, the backing for myself to say I'm qualified now to get out there and do it. So the business experience I've got is so varied, or corporate or professional experience or whatever you want to call it. It's so varied that it means that I now, in each of the businesses, can be really versatile and varied and I guess service based in a really unique way, because I can't just look at something creatively. I have to look at it from a business and creative sense, and that served me really well across all of them. Even on the Control Freak side of things, we design and create those products ourselves from scratch, and obviously send them off to print and things. But we have full creative control over every single detail. And there's the creative element of that, which I love, but then there's also, how do I make this product viable? How do I cost it? How do I get, that the two sides fire together. Yet my business partner in Control Freak, Yvette, is the one with the amazing artistic skills. She does watercolour and illustration. Anything she picks up creatively or artistically, she just nails. And we've been to a few creative workshops together, and I'm like, let's just show yours. Let's not show mine. But had I not done that time, would I be doing what I'm doing now with such, I guess, confidence? And I would never say it's done with ease, because nothing in business is easy. But no, I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't done that first. It's definitely served me well, and it definitely means I find the decision-making process of business a whole lot easier than a lot of the people I work with. Yeah. So I coach from a business and brand strategy perspective, and it's a really unique skill set I've ended up with. Yeah. So as much as I look back at those times where I did 4 years here and this and 5 years, and working in property management and real estate nearly killed me. That was the most horrific phase of my career that there was. Even that, I was never able to separate the personal from conflict until I worked in real estate, and just went, you have to completely detach from this and deal with it as a situation and not people coming at you. So each step definitely shaped.
With your, multiple angles of having a creative business, especially with taking care of the business side, and you mentioned the artistic side. On a personal level, has it been much of a struggle for you to act between an Excel sheet and a Photoshop, essentially?
No, it's funny. Like I said before, I think there's several types of creatives. Well, there's many types, but if you were going to categorise them down pretty quickly, you do have the artistic creatives who find the formality of things really difficult. And then I think you've got really technical creatives who can solve any solution with some really impressive ideas and problem solving. And I sit somewhere in between the two, I think. Right. And I don't find the duality difficult at all. I find I approach both almost in the same way. I'm far more distracted and I procrastinate more when I'm doing the business side, because I want to do the fun side all the time. But I approach both, and I think, again, that's quite rare. I work with a lot of creatives and help them, and then they can get there, but the business side has zero interest to them, where even though if I had to give one up, I'd give up the business side and I'd keep the creative side. It's what I enjoy for me more, but it would be the complete opposite. There's almost something really similar in them that you can get to make sense if you really push down that path. But no, the duality doesn't.
Have you ever had to make the decision where you have to forego one for the other, like for a specific, maybe a product launch or a campaign?
100%. When it comes to that's the hardest thing about product. And we've had a product business before that we sold a few years ago, which was in sports apparel, so really out of our wheelhouse. It wasn't what we love. It was just a business that did really well by chance. When it comes to product, that's why I think a lot of creatives struggle, because you do have to make compromise based on cost, based on availability, especially being in Perth, and on quantity. Quantity is the big killer. So, you can produce something beautifully at massive quantities, but it's really hard to do them in small quantities and get the same quality and the same finishes and the same, detail in there. So product is a real leveler for a creative.
It's as you mentioned, like, for example, say if one creative, right, like they could be making anything, whether it's jewelry or, I don't know, painting or whatever. But as you mentioned, like, making small quantities is more expensive. It's less viable versus making more or whatever the market mechanisms or dynamics are, right? In your from your perspective, should a creative ever be like, no, I want to do it in small quantity, I just have to, because this is what my heart wants? but the business side's going, no, we can't afford it, right?
Yeah.
How should a creative approach that from your perspective? Like, is there an inherent responsibility for the creative to serve other than themselves?
I think there's two really important things for creatives to remember. One is if you are going to compare yourself to other things available out there that are cheaper, you will never produce anything, right? We produce the diaries and we sell them. If you're not on subscription, they're $44.95 each for a 3-month diary, right? And at the start when we launched them, we got a lot of people who would email us and say, look, I can get a diary for a whole year for $5 from Kmart. It's like, that's fantastic. And the business me kicks in. If that was creative me, I'd be in the corner crying and thinking, crap, I've got to halve the price of my product so people will buy it, and I'd go into that spin, right? The business brain kicks in, and I can easily detach, and I write back to people like that and say, you're absolutely right, you can. And if that diary is perfect for you, I agree you should go and buy that $5 Kmart diary. But if you look at the feedback from the people who use our diary, it's been crafted by people who do what you do, which is run a small business, and hours of time have gone into, and every edition we change what needs to change. So each time you're buying it, you're buying something that's completely relevant and current and made for you. And that's where that you've got to flex those muscles. You have to understand that if you can viably produce something at a point that people will fall in love with it and purchase it, you cannot worry that yours is $50 and they're $5 at Big W. You cannot look at the difference between the two. If you can detach from that, then the solution is a whole lot easier to come to. Sometimes there's a tipping point where no matter how hard you try, you cannot produce it the way you want to do and make it viable for sale. Or creatives fall in the trap of doing it and making a very small profit margin. And when you do the numbers back, they're working for about $1 an hour. And when I do that process with a client, I'll often say to them, I'll hire you for $5 an hour. Like, I'll take your creativity. You're paying yourself about $1 an hour on what you're doing. I'll pay you $5 and you can come and work for me. It's something that you learn over time, but you have to, you have to be okay with charging what you need to for your product to be viable. And there are people out there, you know, we expected to sell 20 diaries the first time, if that. And it was quite the opposite. And we sold hundreds of them and we thought, crap, we're not prepared for this. We were just going to go out with a little lot. But people saw the value, the creative element. Yvette hand-lettered everything for us. It was just, you know, it was done really, really well, and people saw that value and were paying $45 for something that was 3 months versus $5 for a 12 months. So you have to be able to extract that, but you're also, the other thing creatives don't do well is understand their numbers. You know, not just detaching from the emotion, but you have to understand things like, you know, you're going to have contingencies in there when you're selling a product. If it gets broken in transit, how much does that cost you to replace it? Are you covering that within, you know, there's so many elements to it that put people off creating products that, But look, it's not often, I don't think, that a solution can't be found to either compromise or produce in the way that you want to. And it may just be that you've got to bump into a premium category versus, you know, a more affordable category, or there's always a way, and it's about priorities. But if your product needs to be produced a certain way to provide that experience, I'm a big believer that there will be people out there who will value that experience.
Right. And with, you know, as I mentioned, you've consulted with many creatives and you've worked with so many of them. Have you picked up any pattern? I know you mentioned that there are different kinds of creatives, but overall, have you picked up any pattern or just overall trends among creatives where there's this pain point or this specific thing that sticks out for them where they're too scared to take the leap into the industry or doing anything that actually benefits them? So any sort of trends or patterns that you might have?
There's many. The obvious one that's spoken about a fair bit, I think, is the old comparison game. Comparison will stop a huge percentage of creatives getting out there and putting what they've got out there, which is really sad because I believe every creative's got something unique to bring to something, even if it's been done a million times over. There's something unique, and I think comparing to other creatives, other big organisations, everything is a huge one, and getting out of that, you've got to detach that emotional attachment. You've got to separate yourself personally from what you're creating, and you've got to look at it from a really logical perspective, which is really, really difficult for a creative mind in most cases, really difficult. So comparison is one that I think stops many, many people in their tracks. I also think the lack of business understanding stops a lot of people too. And a lot of people will attempt and fail because they do get down the track. They get 6 months down the track and think, wow, I've done all of this work. I've worked 15 hours a day. I am exhausted. I've got nothing left. I'm fully depleted and I've made no money. And they do it because it's really difficult when what you do for money is what you love to do, because you almost feel honoured to be able to do that. And so many people do it for, the experience, or they'll not charge what they should because they want to do the project versus, there's a lot of lack of business understanding for creatives that kill. And they're two really common things.
And I guess that's where greater establishment comes in.
Correct.
Because that's where you're trying to bridge that gap between, creative who has no idea or has limited ideas about taking their stuff into the market.
Yeah.
And just through doing that, has it ever, occurred to you that a lot of the creatives are just not in tune with the business side? Like do you think, actually I'll make this a two-part question.
Yep.
So do you think can anyone be a creative, first of all? And second of all, can all creatives be business-minded?
Okay. Everybody is creative in some way, shape or form.
Sure.
I truly believe that everybody is creative in their own way. Can they be creative in a way to make money is a different thing, right? Because taking your creativity and making it commercial is difficult. But yes, I think, I'm a perfect example. If you were going to look at my history and my education and my qualifications up until the point where I made the jump, I wasn't a creative person per se. So yes, I think everybody can be creative. I think everybody needs to forget the preconceived idea of what being creative is. Because I think that scares a lot of people off. Is, if I was going to give up interior design because I couldn't hand draw an interior, I wouldn't have got anywhere. I found ways to do that, and I digitally created so the software would correct my my drawing, or I would use different mediums where I would use imagery over photoshopped transparencies.
I mean, that's being creative in itself.
Yeah,
like you're working
100%.
with restrictions, right?
And I've tried a million times, and I've put a lot of time into being able to draw. It's just my brain can't compute to a pencil. It just cannot do it. So I find other ways to do it. So I think everybody has a way to become creative. Can every creative become business-minded if they will actually accept the process? Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I think, and I've seen a lot who get to that point and go, oh, right, I get it now, I get it. And it's about self-belief. I think as soon as a creative sees they can make their worth from their craft, it becomes a whole lot easier to want to understand the business side. But when you're struggling and not making money and you're finding it really difficult and things aren't getting off the ground, it's really hard to be inspired to learn that, because you don't feel like it's making you any money in the first place.
There's so many things as well, say if a graphic artist wanted to start an e-commerce business, right? It could be something as simple as doing t-shirts or something like that, where they're just printing their designs on the t-shirts. The whole process of that one person overtaking the process of, the marketing of the business, the product management, the making sure the stockpiling and all that kind of stuff, it actually takes away from the creative process a lot of the times. How do you, as a consultant or someone who helps creatives, then suggest them to manage these things at the same time? Because I'm sure, as you mentioned yourself, like you sometimes procrastinate on the business side because the fun side is actually designing and creating and connecting with your community and things like that. But it's the Excel sheets and the numbers and all the stuff that bogs you down. So how do you suggest someone tackle that?
Yeah. When I'm working with clients, something I do first is really get inside of how they think about their business and what they love doing and what they hate doing. And there's a few factors there that I would suggest. I think time blocking is really important for creative people. So get up, allocate 15 minutes in the morning to go through your inbox and see what you've got there and deal with that. Allocate another 15 minutes in the middle of the day to do something else that maybe you dread doing, same at the end of the day or on the weekend or whenever it is, and time block in non-negotiable. You have to do that stuff you don't like in that hour on that day, and then you're free to do whatever you want to do in those other hours. So time blocking, I think, works really well for creative people because they can accept that, they can see it visually in front of them that little block out of my whole week has to be on that one thing. So I find that works really, really well. I think having an outsourcing goal and plan is really big, and that's something I've really started looking at with people who are really struggling with all the hats they have to wear, is set yourself a target or a goal. So if you can hit X amount of revenue in a month, what of that will you allow yourself to allocate out to outsource, and what will that be? What's your number one dream? What's the first thing you want off your plate? And I can guarantee you 95% of the time it's the financial reporting, bookkeeping, all that stuff. Creatives hate it with a passion. They hate it. And the amount of clients I've recommended over to a really great accountant bookkeeper team that I know, who's headed up by Michelle Maynard at Carbon, as soon as they get in there and they say, oh my gosh, this is the best money I've ever spent. I now understand it, but it's not my problem anymore. Yeah. So, but you've got to set a goal around that. Nobody, rarely, some people do, but nobody's got the budget to go into business and just pay for everybody to do everything, right? Yeah. So it's really good to set yourself that first $1,000 I make, I'm going to spend $250 on a meeting with X to start the process of outsourcing, or whatever. And I get them to make a list from top to bottom in order of the things you don't like to do. What will you outsource first? And then you get to cross those off over time. You get to shift them out. And as soon as you've got the capacity to do it, bang. You're not going to go and buy yourself, you know, whatever it is you want to spend that money on. You're going to go, am I going to do that, or am I going to spend the money on getting my bookkeeping done externally, or whatever it is, to then open up the creativity to produce more, to sell more, to make more. It's a pretty easy flow when you look at it from the outside. But
I think that it almost sounds like the creatives have to accept that there will be some levels of getting your hands dirty. Yep. And if you don't have a plan, you'll just keep getting stuck in that same cycle forever. Yeah. So it's best that you accept that you have to get your hands dirty, have a plan, and then outsource things that you don't like doing, so that you can focus back on 100%.
And like I said, that time blocking works beautifully, because you know that's your crappy time to sit down and do that, but it's ticked off, and then you get however long next.
That's very cool. This almost reminds me of me in school. Like I had like this routine things, like blocking like certain times of the day where I just have to do that specific subject, and everything else is like, okay, if you do this, you can go outside and play and kind of stuff. So it's almost like that. Yeah.
And I think the problem is creatives go into such a structured educational environment.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yet there's a disconnect, because they go into a structured environment, yet there is no real world influence into. They say there is there? Not so much. There's no real world influence into how they learn their craft. So, you know, when I did interiors, I did 3 full-time years of interior design. Not a single project I worked on was I ever given a budget.
Wow.
It was just create this space and go for it. How could you possibly then go out and have a client give you a budget that's a tenth of what you were hoping for and create something good? And that puts you off. That's a deterrent. That's wow, I'm not equipped for this. I can't do this. Same with the time management. There is not enough time management taught in degrees of any discipline. I did lecture for 3 years, and when the first lesson, they're like, oh, we've got our lesson plan. I'm like, put that aside. The first thing we're doing is I'm going to teach you how to go through every brief you've got, break that down into time, how much time you're going to allocate to each bit, and we're going to schedule out your next 12 weeks. And they're like, what? I'm like, trust me on this. And the amount of students, some just never got it, some it just wouldn't work for, but the amount that would come back and go, oh my gosh, this works. I said I would spend 4 hours rendering these images, and I only did 4 hours. And I'm like, there you go.
It's almost like there's a lack of personal development ideas in entire education industry. Like it's just, you come in, you do the nitty-gritties of the exact course, everything else, like it's up to you, but I think you're right. I think there is that lack of understanding yourself first before you jump into that stuff. But it's interesting because you also consult non-creative people, like people who just want to build their businesses and stuff. What are the distinctions between consulting a non-creative versus a creative person for a similar kind of building a business for themselves?
Generally, it's what creatives do really well versus, we'll call them non-creatives, but I'm kind of inclined not to. But what they do differently, creatives will accept doing things a different way. So they'll be more open to, if you say to them, look, you want to launch this, but there's plenty of it out there and you've held off because you're not, have you thought about doing it this way?
Right.
A creative will go, oh, that's a great idea. Let me go away and think about that. A less creative mind will go, oh, no, we can't do it that way. Nobody else is doing it that way. There's a difference in the way that you can push creatives versus less creative people. They can get there, but I think, and a lot of the consultancy and sort of contracting I'm doing at the moment is with people who are amazing at what they do. Whatever their skill is that they're freelancing or contracting or doing, they are world class, but they don't know how to communicate that out to other people, and they feel funny doing it in a different way. Whereas a creative will go, hell yeah, you want me to create a video where I'm doing this and I'll give it a go. Whereas less creative, they're a little bit hesitant around that, and that's the difference. And both sides of the equation, they have their own difficulties. But I think for non-creative people, they find it really hard to just have the courage to do something different, to stand out, to deliver something a completely different way. And I think that's probably the difference between the two.
I've seen a lot of personalities also kind of clash, like, like being an introvert and extrovert. Generally, you think creatives are a lot more introvert than general. But it seems like they're more willing to take on risks rather than the I guess the other party.
Yeah, you have to. You're at a disadvantage in my mind that when you're putting your creativity out there, it does fall back on you. It is a reflection of you, and you have to be able to take that risk. And I only learnt this year. I had a heap of personality and psychological testing done in a leadership program I'm doing, and I'm an introvert, and I never knew that. I'm 41, and I just found out I'm an introvert. But because I'm so comfortable in public environments and with groups of people, but there's an element to introversion that I never really understood, and I would go to big events and I'd comfortably walk in the room on my own. It doesn't bother me. I'd start a conversation with anybody and chat, but I would not engage with a big group. And I used to go home from networking things and think, why didn't I talk to more people? And it's now I go, oh, duh, because that's you. You're an introvert. But are creatives more introverted than extroverted? Probably yes, in the stereotypical sense of it, but I think
without hard data, it's hard to tell.
But I think creatives have to be more courageous. They have to, they have to learn a broader set of skills to get out there, and I think that pushes them a bit more.
Fair enough. A bit personal here. You mentioned that you've got 2 daughters. You've got a family, quite a big one with the dogs as well.
Yes.
With that coming into the equation, it sounds like you mentioned that you got into the creative world when your second daughter was born, right? I became a father recently myself. I've got a 9-month-old, and even though I don't want to use, I guess, my daughter's being as an excuse for my own shortcomings, but I have, of course, struggled over the last 12 months in the sense of focusing on certain things, and I'm very blessed, very privileged with my daughter. Like, she's completely fine. But even then, I think when there's something else that occupies your mind, I found it harder to focus on certain, that being in that zone of that creative world and things of that sort, right? With your life as well, has that ever been an issue with you, or have you ever struggled with balancing, personal life with creative life? Because there is the notion out there, especially in the world of say music or the whole rock star world, where they don't really care about family or anything like that per se. They're just focused on their craft, and that's why most of them have like very rock star life, right? But at the same time, their craft doesn't suffer because they don't care about the other side. For a lot of people, that balancing act, it's almost like you have to forego one for the other. What's your experience with building a family and building a career in the creative world? Has it ever clashed? How do you tackle if it has ever?
Oh, look, it clashes every single day. There's no such thing as balance. And I used to, go back 5 years ago, I used to say to people, being in business or being a creative either or is like juggling 3 more balls than you've got hands for, right? So there's always one that'll hit the deck or 2 or 3 because you can't carry them all. I've actually learnt now that even that's probably a really kind explanation of what it's like. But what I've always done is you have to be doing what you're doing for more than just the money in the bank, right? And we all know this. It's the topic of conversation at the moment, right? You've got to know your why, you've got to know your purpose. But the biggest example I want to set for my girls, because I've got a fire in my belly about being a 16-year-old girl who was very intelligent but told you couldn't be something, right? I was told I couldn't be creative, I had to go and do it. I want my girls to live in a world where it's okay for them to chase whatever they want to do. I don't care what it is, as long as it's what you want to do. So everything I do in all the businesses and organisations that I'm running and part of, each one of those is to facilitate and empower other people to do whatever they want to do. Don't care what it is. I can put the same process in on whatever it is, your business or whatever it is you want to do. If in the times when the balance is off, so I'm working too much and I know the girls aren't getting enough attention, but I just can't tilt it back yet, because I always make sure I can tilt it back. But if I can't tilt it back yet, if they're going to see me doing this, I want them to see me doing it for that reason, that I've created a life I want to live. And yes, I'm stressed, but I still love what I'm doing, and that it's all for a higher purpose. It's all for... Chloe's been around Gorilla because she's younger. Kaylin comes in a bit too, but Chloe's been in there from the start and knows that we run workshops to teach people the stuff they need to go and do what they want to do. So as long as she's really aware that, yes, sometimes I'm not there as much as I need to be, but it's for that reason and not combined with me coming at home and saying, I hate my job, I hate my... If there's a kilter imbalance and they think I resent what I'm doing, that's when I would start to go, that's not a great example to be setting. But I try and make little snippets of time, because it used to be you just keep going. But now it's like, look, 5 minutes to a 10-year-old is like 5 hours to an adult, right? Yeah. So just shut up and sit down for 5 minutes, let her do what she needs to do and be okay with, for me, that 5 minutes was good. You know, that was good for her. But you've got to accept that it will never be perfectly in balance, but it's also really important. And that's why a few people I've coached out of business, they're working 15, 16, 17 hours a day. They're not enjoying it. They're not making any money. They're not seeing their family. They're not. And I'm like, well, why are you what is the purpose here? You've got to, and they've gone, crap, I've really got to reassess. But as long as the girls are seeing from me that if I sacrifice time with them, which is reality, it doesn't matter if you're in business, in work, in looking for work, it doesn't matter, right? If I sacrifice my time with them, it's got to be for something that I'm loving doing.
In a lot of the answers you mentioned, time blocking and having a schedule and things of that sort. Do you have a routine yourself where you practice these?
Yes, I do, but not to the degree that I get my clients to do. And it's quite funny because it's that old do as I say, not as I do, right? But what I do have is some really habitual things I do that if I don't do those, then I'm in trouble for the week ahead. So Sunday night is 100% my planning point. I have to look at my week ahead on a Sunday. If I go into Monday not having looked at what the days look like ahead, I just mentally, I can't catch up. I can't do it. So every Sunday night I will sit down, look at what appointments I've got coming up, look at what other things I need to organise around it, make sure if, Chloe needs to go home with somebody else after school or, get all of that sorted. And what I look at is how much energy is going to be needed for the things that are in my calendar, right? Because there's certain things that you do that take a lot more energy than others. So client meetings, strategy meetings, they'll go for up to 2 hours, but that'll knock me for the rest of the day because you're really putting everything into it. So Sunday night I sit and look at that and I go, right, Wednesday's going to be a write-off because I've got 2 strategy meetings and I'm not going to cope by the end of that. And I use my diary obviously to do that. And on the diary, I've got at the start of the day and the end of the day. So our diaries go from about 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. I think. at the bottom of the day and the top of the day are the 3 things that I need to do during the day and the 3 things I have to have done before I go to bed. Now, I don't get all of them done all the time, but that's sort of my awareness of if you do nothing but these things today, you have to do those. And that's a habit that I've done for the last, well, we're in the 5th year of the diary and I've been doing it ever since pretty much we made it, is the night before I go to bed, I write the 3 things for the next morning. And when I get up, I look at those and I write the 3 things for the end of the day. So
and you've been doing it every day?
Oh, yeah. It's a must. Otherwise, I can't get my head together. So when I go to bed, I know, don't think about the things you've written it down. It's okay. You know what you're doing in the morning. Don't think about it. And I fall off to sleep really easily. And when I get up, I'll look at those things, go, yep, I've got to do that. I've got to do these appointments. And then I'll add in at the end of the day the things I need to do. And that process is really consistent for me, and it helps a lot because I used to go to bed and think over and over and over, don't forget to do that when you get up, don't forget to do that. So that's a huge thing. And for me, for the last 12 months, I've brought physical movement exercise back into my routine and have done that religiously for nearly 12 months now, and I didn't realise how important that was. I let that go for many years. And having done that since, it's not only good because you're moving your body and it's good for you, it's also good for me to force at least half an hour to an hour of non-work, non-mum, non-anything time. It's really, it's been
almost
huge.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And it's the only time I'm not physically doing something for somebody else, right? Because you're either working or you're doing what you need to do for your kids or around the house or or clean my car or it's it's all these things. That time, whether it's, I always do at least half an hour, but it's max an hour, is the only time where what I'm doing is purely for my benefit and that's it. And apart from sleep, I guess. And it's been really important to pull that back in, not just for the movement, but to remind myself that stop getting so trapped into thinking that I've got to work every minute I've got. So they're the 2 things, is that sort of morning and night priorities and getting that movement back in just for that switch off.
Do you ever get ruts or blocks where you just can't think, and how do you go about that?
Here's the thing about me. I am 100% the person who produces something absolutely amazing an hour before it's due.
Oh man, I think
and it kills me.
We're the same.
I could sit down with 6 weeks to do something and my creativity just gets up and leaves the room.
Why does it happen to us?
I don't know, but it's
I've tried
frustrating.
I know, and it's like when I see, and it's the same in my university assignments as well. I would be belting out the best novel in the last hour of submission.
100%. Yep.
So how do you go about that? Like, do you?
I just embrace it now. Like I've
given up.
I've tried, and what I create in the moment that is needed right now is 100 times better than what I create when I've got time up my sleeve. And I don't know why.
Same.
I've been told in this program I was doing, I'm being mentored by 2 amazing psychologists who have said some people just work that way and the pressure is needed for your creativity to kick in. I'm like, well, that's been me my whole life. Like I said, I'd rock up to exams as a 16-year-old and I wouldn't study. I'd just make sure that in my mind I had what I needed to know. I sat down yesterday to create a graphic for a client who rang up and just said, look, I need this urgently. I'm so sorry to dump it on you. And I said, look, it'll take me 15 minutes. It's fine. And what I created, I almost wanted to keep for myself. I created and went, oh, I want that. I want that for our branding. But I gave, and they're like, oh my God, how did you do that so quick? It's because I had to then and there. If you give me time, my creative brain just goes wandering.
Right.
And it pulls too much inspiration and it pulls too much. I can't do things with time up my sleeve. I've just learned that that's just not the case, and it drives people nuts, and I know it's a really crappy habit to be in, but I also know that by far the things my clients love when I deliver are without fail all the time the things I did the night before. I'll give 3 options, 2 of which I've done weeks ago and then 1 I did the night before because I think I'm not happy with it, and they'll see the one I did the night before and go, oh my God, I love that. And I'm like, yep, of course you do. Why did I do those other ones?
It's the same. It's frustrating, but and I think, do you kind of get almost like a high off of the time when you're done.
Yep.
Like, is that what you chase? Like that?
I don't know. It might be.
Because for me, for example, my favorite moment of first handing in an assignment
Yep.
was closing all the tabs.
Yeah.
And that was just
Bye-bye.
a huge rush of dopamine. It's like, oh
Yeah.
yes, this is what I was chasing all this time.
Yeah.
But I don't get it either. I do the same thing. It's
I just get a higher level of
I think it's the rush,
Yeah.
the creative rush, the
adrenaline
excitement
kicks in,
I know,
and
I
it's
know,
like
yeah.
pull these together, and it's
Yeah.
almost like that. You know, when you watch those shows where somebody's got those superpowers where they can visualize things
Yeah,
happening
yeah,
in their
yeah.
head. It's like that happens over something really tiny, but
It's almost like you get into that zone.
when there's
right?
no pressure,
Yeah.
I overthink and I swirl around in circles and I think, I
So
can
almost
do
to
this,
get
I
out
can
of
do
the rut,
this. It's-
like
yeah.
your rut or your block, like do you then put your artificial pressures around you? Like
There's no such thing as artificial
I know, right?
pressure,
Because when you
Too
put a deadline on
strict.
yourself,
you
it's
can't
like,
do
nope.
that. Nah, it's got to be a real pressure. It's got to be real.
So how does that work for your self-discipline? Because I know you mentioned that you've got this routine stuff which requires a lot of discipline, right? I almost like talking to you, I find that right now a lot of that mentality has crept into my self-discipline life where if I put a deadline or like, oh, I can't have sugar for the rest of the day or I can't
Yep.
do this, I still kind of cross over that line. I was like, oh, it's my deadline. That doesn't matter kind of thing, you know?
Not real.
So how does that impact your, or has it impacted any of your other aspects of life?
Oh, look, I'm a pretty chaotic person, if I'm honest. But I'm really comfortable in that. I'm really comfortable that, we'll be going out for dinner and I know Chloe needs looking after, but I'll have 3 plans in my head and I'll do it, 2 days before. I'll organise somebody to look at him. And my husband, I know, will be like, hey, is Chloe, I just live that way, and I've really got to start, I've got to start showing up and serving my clients, respecting that for myself, because I go into this things should take this long and things should flow out this way path, and that's what I map out with them. But when it comes to reality, what I should say is I'm not going to start this for 3 weeks, but when I do, it'll take me 24 hours and you'll get the best out of me. That's what I should be doing because it's the reality. And I've got to start finding a way to do that, because like I said, that client who rang up yesterday, that graphic was amazing, and that was instant, on the spot, done. Yet if they said I need it in 2 weeks' time, it would be a completely different process.
Quick question. Are you always the last one to board a plane?
Yeah. Oh, most of the time. Not always, but most of the time.
But one of the
yes.
last few ones,
Yeah.
usually.
I'm the one that always has something happens that, I'm the one who gets pulled over for, I was driving my then partner's car, is my husband now, but I drove it to the airport and I didn't know the floodlights were on the front, and I got pulled over by the police, and I said to him, I'm catching a plane, and there was 2 of them, and one was really sympathetic and the other one said, I don't care, you shouldn't be driving a car with the lights on, right? You should know how the lights work. And I literally, that was the latest I've ever been for a plane, and I swear they were about to close the door and I came flying through and I was sweaty and I was, I'm sorry, it wasn't my fault. But I've learnt now to take that sort of time pressure, I've learnt to take off myself.
Right, okay.
I don't want to be making those things less enjoyable by being last minute.
Right.
You have to with kids too, because
of course.
it's just a different ball game.
Rants or pet peeves that you have about, I guess, I don't know, like creative gurus or something like that really bothers you and you would love to change?
Oh, look, that's a dangerous question to ask somebody with a lot of opinions.
Exactly why I'm asking this question to you right now. I follow your stories.
Look, let's see. I think that one of the biggest struggles that the graduates that we mentor face is we need a graduate junior with X amount of experience to get out there. And I think it's that sort of mentality when it comes to industry that really knocks people coming through that have amazing talent. And yes, they're a little bit green in certain things, but I think there needs to be more of a nurturing process. I think for creatives can't just, and I can say this because I've done 2/3 nearly a full accounting degree, so I can say it. What you learn is relatively black and white in those sort of industries. We're in a creative industry, same with architecture, same with, all of it, marketing, everything. It's all just theoretical, and you don't get real life until you're out there doing it. And I don't think there's enough of a nurturing process for that sort of thing. And I think people really underestimate the asset that a really great creative mind can bring to any organisation in any role. So I think if there was one thing in support of creatives that I would like to champion is just smashing open that really structured, typical process that they need to go through to get out there and get into the industry and into the jobs that they're chasing. I also think Perth itself, I think we've come a long way from what we were when I started studying to even where we are now. I think Perth is starting to realise that, you know, a creative city is a great city to live in, and I'm hoping that that's the shift that we see more and more and more, especially now we're so, you know, we're more isolated within where we live because you can't leave and nobody can come in. So we're sort of this little bubble everywhere, right? But I'm hoping that creativity is given the respect it deserves. I'm mentoring a really great young interior designer at the moment. She's a young Indigenous designer. She was one of my students that was just exceptional in her process. And she's trying to get Indigenous design into mainstream architecture, and her biggest thing that she's facing is it's an afterthought, right? We're getting to the end of a project and going, it's pretty stock standard. There's not really much cultural or creativity respect paid here. What do we do now? And it's really hard to go back. So bringing creativity in the ground level of everything is really important. And she's starting to fight some real battles against some people that I'm really proud of her. She's put her foot down and said, hang on, you need me now. Don't come to me in 2 years when it's built and want an input. So I think it would be really nice to see creativity and that sort of design thinking given the respect it deserves in a process, and not just your typical step-by-step process into a project. You know, I'm looking at it from an interiors perspective, but even which the relationship between architects and interior designers can be really strained because for some reason there's this belief that there's different agendas there, yet really they should be side by side. They're so damn similar, and working together with those sort of angles would be, you know, far more advantageous for a project. But so I'd love to see creativity have its moment in the sun. I think everybody needs it, everybody loves it, but nobody respects it. Nobody puts it up on the pedestal like it should. So I'm really hoping that it has its moment in the sun, but I don't think it can do that until the creatives themselves push the importance and push their value.
It's it reminded me of this thing last year. I don't know if you saw this meme going around, but it was this graphic, right, on a newspaper that was going around and saying that the top 5 important jobs and the other ones like top 5 least important jobs. And the top 5 important jobs, like for the doctor and frontline workers and stuff like that. And the least important was a graphic designer, musician, yada, yada, yada. Yep. But the whole thing was actually a graphic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the funny thing was the graphic designer was just making it as like, yep, least important job right here.
Yep, 100%. I just communicated it for you, but
But I understand where it comes from. Like, sure, it's not, you're not saving lives per se on a very granular black and white level, but at the same time you're making, because there's no way to.
I'd argue that, though, because if emergency room doesn't have an emergency sign, how would you find your doctor in the first place?
No, of course.
I know you're on the same page.
Yeah. It's there's also no way to measure that. This song didn't make me go, like I was having a bad day, but this song really lifted me up. Like nobody's writing that in a piece of data or anything like that.
Yeah, music saves lives, 100%. Seen it firsthand. It's
any piece of art has the potential to do so. Like whether it's music or TV show or whatever. So, with the 3 things that you focus most of your professional time on, how do you kind of compartmentalize your brain for them? Do they need similar kind of energies or?
Yeah. All 3 sound really different on the surface, but when you come right back to what it is I'm doing with them all of them are what I said to you earlier. All of them are there to allow people to chase down what it is they want to do. So Gorilla is quite focused on uni students and graduates, so helping them transition and chase down that opportunity. The e-com store, even though on the surface they're paper products and pretty notepads and things, they are designed for people to cope with a busy life. So, the diaries are for people who are in small business. Even the notepads we make are specifically designed to make something easier for somebody so they might keep going and keep doing it, right? So they relate. And then when you look at Gameface side of things, 100%, I've explained that already, what I do for people. And that is to make them see how they can do things their way so they can do what they want. So the energy to me is really similar because all of the things produced or provided in all three are essentially the same. It's just a different medium that they're delivered in. So the thing that I find, I guess the struggle is I've got 3 really great things that I could put all my time into, and 3 I refuse to give up. So it's just this endless, I need to do this. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do this. And where do I do this? Like I come up with an idea and think, is that a gorilla thing? Is that a control freak thing? Is it a Gameface thing? And that's the hardest thing for me. But at the end of the day, all 3 essentially are me making a difference for people to do whatever the hell they want. And that, they all make perfect sense to me together. But if I could somehow, and I've tried a million times, but if I could somehow pull them all together, I would, because to me it's all essentially the same thing. But yeah, it just logistically can't be done that way.
What is quality to you, in a sense of what is a quality piece of creative work?
Quality is something that's made a difference for somebody else in the right way. Like quality is a problem solved. Quality is something that, it achieves the outcome it needs. It doesn't matter what it is that's being produced. Quality is something that doesn't fail in what it was put out there to do. And we see it every day, like you see, if you come back to signage and things, when you see signs that confuse the crap out of you, like that's not quality. It can be produced on the best material with the best font, but it's not quality because the people are confused where they need to go. That's not quality. So I think quality for me is probably a problem solved, I guess.
Cool. Well, I think it's a fair answer. I ask this question to every creative because it's such a it can live on such a broad spectrum of answers. So it gives me quite an interesting perspective into the person. So we're almost heading towards the end of the conversation. So anyone you particularly look up to in general in terms of influences?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I follow so many people for so many different reasons. The one I guess if I'm really fangirling and looking up to somebody at the moment, it would be Samantha Wills. She used to have a jewellery line in Australia, which she started as a very, very young woman. She was 21, I think. Became an international absolute powerhouse, but at the sacrifice of her personal life as well. I've just finished reading her book. I saw her speak recently at an event as well. And her courage, and anybody who wants to read a book about somebody who puts integrity and themselves first, I highly recommend. It's called Of Golden Dust. And her story is one of the first ones in a long time to inspire me from start to finish. Her courage of what she did. I highly recommend looking up the story, even if you don't read the book. She walked away from a multi-million-dollar business because she couldn't continue on with creative integrity. And to me, as a creative individual who is all about doing things your way, the courage that took is just phenomenal to me. So if there was anybody I was going to put up on the pedestal at the moment, it would be Samantha Wills. Her story is just amazing. I've reached out to her a few times on Instagram and she is just lovely and takes the time to answer you, and it just seems to be really genuine. But the courage that she showed in more ways than one, not just at the end of the business, but throughout building the business, to reach those levels and still be so grounded as a person, I just find really, really inspiring. So
cool.
Yeah.
Personal goal in 5 years.
Oh, see, it's really funny because 10 years ago I said I wanted to be retired by the time I was 40, and now I'm 41 and nowhere near. So we keep going. Look, within 5 years, I would like to be, within 5 years, I want to be doing nothing that causes me to procrastinate.
Wow.
That's the goal. If I can be getting up every day and everything I'm doing, I can go straight into and do, and not the stuff that I'm, dancing around. And if you're a procrastinator like me, you know your habits that you go into and your signs. But I would love to say in 5 years' time, everything I'm putting my time into, I don't want to step away from.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Finally, for someone who's listening in and aspiring creative, what are 3 actionable steps that they can take to, I guess, walk the path of you?
Yep. Separate the emotion. I was taught that quite some time ago. Definitely learn how to separate yourself and your worth from the work that you do, because sometimes your work won't be good enough, or it needs more work, or it's just not what your client wants to see. It's just the reality, right? We're all humans and have different things. But if you can separate emotion from the reality of a situation, then that will serve you really, really well. Don't follow people that make you doubt yourself. It's a huge problem at the moment with social media, and I say at the moment, it's our reality now, but endless time wasted looking at what other people are doing, feeling bad about that, comparing yourself to that, changing the way you would do something organically to suit that, I think is soul destroying. I was chatting to a friend of mine who runs a yoga studio, and she said she doesn't follow many yoga studios for that exact reason, because she wants to create everything from heart and not from outside influence. And it's not that she doesn't support them. She mentors a lot of them and she helps them, but she doesn't want to watch their content because it shapes what she does. Right. So 100% separate yourself from the things that cause you to change your path, because I think that's a really difficult trap to get out of. And third is to make sure that, like I said before when we were talking about the balance side, it doesn't matter if it's what you think it was going to look like. If you are going to work that damn hard and sacrifice so much and take so much crap from other people and doubt yourself over something, you've got to make sure it's what you really want to be doing. And I do believe that if you really go after something and shape it how you need it to be, you can get it there. But I'm not saying it's easy, but I think you can. And I think just don't get trapped into chasing what that picture should look like. You've got to go after what you want it to look like. And they sound, it sounds silly, but ask a lot of people how far into a job or a career or a business they've gotten before they realise I don't want to be here, and how much time is lost. And I guess you realise the older you get, time is like
the only resource that's never gonna.
And you can't get it back. You can't multiply it. You can't do anything. And it genuinely breaks my heart to hear people who have lost so much time on something they never really wanted to be doing in the first place. So if you've done a graphic design degree and what you really want to do is music or photography or whatever it is, find a way to do that, because you won't ever succeed truly in something that you don't want to be doing. But so just forget what the picture of what it should look like and form what it is that you want it to be, because it's essential for a creative, less essential for people who love what they're doing in an accounting field because everything is sort of what it is. But yeah, I think you have to let go of what people tell you it should look like and make it how you want it to look.
Kerrie, thank you for your time. Appreciate you. Appreciate the things that you do.
Pleasure.
Thanks for making the world a better place for creatives.
Why? Thank you.
It was good catching up.
You too.
Take care.
Cheers.